Okay, so just filling in a few gaps on the frequently asked questions video. I watched it back and there was a few things I probably should have added, but I only had a limited amount of time and file space, as is the case here, so I'll try and move along. We spoke about women in tree work and I said quite a few things. What I didn't say was that my own personal experience working with women, arborists, tree workers, whatever, was altogether quite positive. You know, they were friendly and upbeat, and you know, I didn't get any attitude. They were competent at whatever the tasks that we were doing on those given days, and they were quite comfortable too. I didn't sense any apprehension. They weren't intimidated. They weren't. They seemed to think it was quite comical working with men. It seemed to appeal to them. It seemed to be quite refreshing. So this notion that they need to be saved and empowered, it proves again, is rubbish. You know, the ones that want to will do. You know, they're kind of their own mind. I don't think they stay away from tree work because they're afraid or intimidated. It's just that it doesn't appeal to them, and I wish more people would accept that. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, so next one, I'm sort of working backwards and off the top of my head. I think I talked about competition climbers, and I used the example of a very bad one that I'd worked with in the past. And I should say also, I should mention that I've worked with some good ones too, and you do meet some good ones. My point is that they were good tree people first, and then got into the competition scene after, most of them, because it's the transition has more significance that way. You know, you don't become a competition climber first and then carry that across into commercial tree work and expect to be any good, because it just doesn't happen. It's not realistic. But you know, I have met and worked with some good ones who were practically minded, and there are definitely some killers out there. I think there's no better example, even though I've not worked with the fellow, I've met him a few times. Mark Chisholm, he did very well in the competition circuit. He was the world champion a few times, I believe. Great big tall fella from the US. He's probably my age, or maybe a year older, I'm not sure now. And you know, you only have to spend a little bit of time with Mark to realise that you know, on a work site, he's not there to play second fiddle to anybody. He's gonna try and, you know, kind of prove himself and prove his dominance. You know, he might not always be successful, but you just, when you talk to him and when you tell stories and exchange information, you know, he just has the look in his eye. He's a killer. So don't, everybody says, oh, Mark's a nice guy and all that, but there's an edge to him, definitely, and he's not there to lose to anybody. Okay, I talked about municipal work and big corporations, and I said, if you, kind of in a roundabout way, said if you want to avoid heavy kind of lifting work and that sort of laborious, monotonous, horrible, degrading kind of work that makes up a big part of our job, then there's an opportunity there in municipal work. What I should have said was that because a lot of their focus is on tree preservation and you know, whether it be pruning or planting or whatever, and if they get anything tricky, they can just sub it out to another company. To you know, they can sub the work out. They don't have to touch it at all. You know, it's within their budget to do that, and they do that. I'm sure I know people that work in the municipal system. They seem very content. It wouldn't be my thing, definitely. You know, they still have to put in the hours. It does seem to be light duty work, I have to say. But I assume there's different kinds of pressures come into it, because they have a lot of procedure in it's fucking going dark. They have a lot of procedure, and there's a lot of red tape involved, and you know, I don't think you can just talk to people and say the things that you want to say. It's very politically correct. Same goes with a lot of big corporations as well. The only thing I would say on the negative side, which I didn't say earlier, and this goes for competition climbers too, is that many, well, certainly a good portion of the ones I've worked with, they get hooked up on rules and stuff, and they can't seem to see past that. In a sense, they get institutionalized by sets of rules, and you know, I've even had competition climbers tell me that it's actually wrong to use a chainsaw with one hand. Wrong is the word. They didn't say it's dangerous, they said it was wrong. Like right, wrong, Old Testament type of stuff, you know, like it's written there in the scriptures somewhere. It's actually wrong. That's how kind of embedded this belief is. These set of rules that somebody else wrote. They didn't even write the rules themselves, but they believe them so passionately and can't seem to see past that. That's a weird way to end up. You know, if you stop thinking for yourself, stop making your own mind up, and just thinking, and you stop, you know, comprehending beyond rules that somebody else wrote, is fucking crazy, you know. Anyway, I'll stop at that one. Okay, so I moved into the workshop because it's gone too dark outside. So question 2 was, I shouldn't brush my hair, how vain of me. I just look weird. I don't like looking in the mirror so much these days. I can see myself on the phone here. So yeah, the question 2 was, will I ever be as good as you? And I answered, no, not a fucking chance, or something like that. Most people realize that was a joke. That was my attempt at humor, being from a country where the humor is very dry and there's a lot of subtleties involved. You know, you don't make it perhaps so obvious. You know, the UK is different. I suppose it's quite unique. Not better or worse humor, but just kind of unique. We've been evolving there for thousands of years as the language. So you know, it is subtle. A nod or a wink can speak volumes, but you either pick up on it or you don't. But anyway, most people thought it was funny for me, except one guy who got really offended and took it very personally, took it as an insult to himself from what I read, and went off on some angry rant about how I have this kind of overinflated ego and I'm very self-centered and all this shit. But yeah, whatever. You know, you can't please everybody all the time. It's a shame, because in the past he's left some, you know, kind of well-informed comments on some of the other videos, and I did reply to him saying, Martin, it's just a joke, chill out. And but unsurprisingly, he never came back to me. Probably too much pride involved to admit he'd made a mistake. But you know, the question itself, you know, I mean, how can you answer that? You can't say there's no such thing as sort of being as good as anybody, being good as somebody at everything, or being better than somebody at everything, realistically. You know, because you know, how do you actually prove it without walking in that person's shoes? You know, going through everything they've gone through. You might be better at them at some things, but they might be better at you at others. You know, if you're talking about people with the same kind of experience and exposure. You know, whilst you might be 100% better than a novice at everything If you have somebody who's kind of equal amount of experience as you, then it's kind of different. It's not so easy to say who is better than somebody else, but you're both kind of, it doesn't really work like that, you know. You kind of just have a healthy respect for each other, and you're working roundabout on the same level most of the time. And unless you specialize in something in particular, like, you know, crane work, or like a lot of some of the guys on the east coast there of the US that only do crane work. That's all they do all the time, you know, crane climbers, and you couldn't expect to be as good as them, like, if you're not doing that all the time, or well, not as much as good, but as efficient as them, because they're totally dialed in. They're doing it every day, you know what I mean? They're doing it without even thinking about it. The processing time will be like seconds to what might take you a minute to work out, you know, because they're so familiar with it all the time. Same as the production faller. You know, if you watch a production faller at work, not only are they deadly accurate, but they have everything worked out in such a short period of time. You know, that whilst let's say somebody like me went and tried to work in a cut block, it would take me way more time to work the whole thing, to work every tree out, before I was absolutely convinced, you know, I was going to be able to send it this way or that way. You know, whilst a faller, if you've worked with them, they just know instantly. You know, they do barely even, it's just one after another, and they're all, you know, you can't expect to be better than them unless you're doing it as frequently as them, or unless you have as much experience as them as well. You know, my thing was, as a younger fellow, was to get as much exposure as I could. You know, that's how I would kind of quantify how good I was going to be, was to get as much exposure as I could, was to go and travel, you know, not just around the country but around the world, working with, you know, in different climates, different sets of problems, lots of different cultures, different individuals. And you know, it was I was a contract climber for over you know, over 20 years. And, you know, I worked with over 150 companies. So you know, and the thing with that is not all the different experiences you have with the trees and problems and species that you come across, and you have to, you know, you have to familiarize yourself with and learn about. When you're working with so many different people and all the time, you know, you have to learn how to get the best out of them, you know, because they're not there to dance to your tune, so to speak. If anything, you're kind of a threat to them when you know, you come and work with a new company as an outsider, as a contractor. Often is the case, people feel threatened by your presence. You know, their noses get put out of joint, and I think that you know, a good portion of them secretly want to see you fail. So you have to navigate that. You have to, you know, kind of, you have to learn how to handle people, and handle different people as well, to get them on your side, you know, and to get the best out of them. It's not that easy. It's a skill in itself. So you know, that was my thing. That was kind of what my mindset was. That was going to make me a better all-rounder. I never really specialized in anything that I could say, well, I'm the best at this or I'm the best at that, but I, you know, what I wanted to be was a good all-rounder. And the type of background and experience that I've built up for myself is that's what's made me into a good all-rounder. You know, never, you know, I was very good at, I suppose I was good at crane work and rigging, and I was a good pruner as well. You know, because I could navigate a tree quickly and efficiently, and I had a very good eye for pruning, canopy reductions, things like that, because I'd bagged so much experience, you know, and I hear this a lot too. I've heard it a lot with people on the internet saying I'm better than you, and I can do this and do that, and I've done this and done that, and you scratch beneath the surface, and they've probably never even worked out their hometown. So that is kind of a classic sort of hometown mentality, I suppose. There's nothing wrong with that. But not only have they had a limited amount of experience, they've also had they've kind of got a limited capacity to think outside their hometown as well. If they think that working in that one location is all you need to know about tree work, that there's nothing else going on anywhere else, they can't comprehend that there's bigger and better things anywhere else. Or you wrongfully assume that you can just do anything, that what you've learnt in your hometown kind of will transition somewhere else, you know what I mean, and into a different climate, into a different, within different species of trees and problems and people. And it doesn't happen that way. It really is very naive to think like that. When I came to BC, it was a learning experience again, even though I came and I already had, well over 20 years experience. I had to learn kind of new things. I had to learn about big conifers. I had to learn kind of how best to not only transition my skills over, but learn new ones as well. It was different. When I came here as a contract climber, people were looking to me as the specialist, because that was always my thing. I came in to a company not to make up the numbers, but to bring something extra to the table. So there's a lot of pressure on you, and unless you've experienced that, then you've got no fucking business telling me that you're so much better than I am, unless you've walked in my shoes, and if you had done that, you wouldn't be coming out with that kind of bullshit, because you would know better that it's not as simple and not as cut and dry as saying I'm better than you and I always will be. A load of fucking shite. When as an example, when I was lucky enough to do a little bit of helilogging, the single stem climbing, where you're climbing big old growth trees. Oh fuck, somebody's back. I'm going to stop that. Hang on a second. Sorry, wife and daughter came back, and I didn't want them opening the door and mithering me about what I'm doing. So just going to give you that example of when I did some helilogging. Now I assumed, because I'm pretty confident about everything, and like I said, I've had all this experience, that I was just going to walk into that and it would I'd just take to it like a duck to water. Because how hard can it be? You're just spurring up these big old trees, cutting all the branches off and topping them. Well, it doesn't quite work out like that. To start off, you're under really tight time constraints, because you basically got 6 hours. You get dropped off in a helicopter and you get picked up 6 hours later, and you absolutely got to be there on time. The terrain is horrific. You're climbing about really steep slopes, trying to find trees on the soaking wet map in the snow and what have you. And then you're stood at the bottom of a tree. You have all this gear, your climbing line and fuel, your saw, axe, wedges, radios, water, and all this shit's got to go up the tree with you because you've got no help. And then you may have like 100 limbs to cut through before you can top the tree. All your rope has to be packed on your bag if you're going to do it that way, or if that's kind of the rule of whoever you're working for, because there's nobody you can't trail it, because nobody's going to be able to free it when it inevitably gets snagged. So it takes a different kind of conditioning to do that, to work in that environment, and to be productive at working on those sort of trees, those size of trees, and doing exactly what you're doing. it's really hard work, much harder than what you would imagine, because of the time constraints and because of all the shit you're packing up there in the tree. But after a bit of time, your conditioning very quickly improves, and all the weight that you were feeling those first few days, suddenly you can't feel it anymore because your conditioning improves so rapidly. Your spurring strides get wider or longer, and you're moving faster. Your soaring patterns get bigger, improve. They get more efficient because you have to cut through limbs rapidly, quick, big ones. And before you know it, you kind of your numbers are going up. Your target numbers, or whatever you want to call them. You're getting through more trees, and you're navigating and getting around quicker, and you're being more organized. Because it's amazing how you can lose time. In our normal residential work, time doesn't matter as much, especially if you're self-employed, because if you have to stay a few more hours to get finished, then that's no problem. But in that environment, it doesn't. You have to be there back at the helicopter, and if you haven't kind of hit your numbers, it's very disappointing. I mean, personally speaking, it's frustrating, because if you just had another 30 minutes, you could get that done, you could get that finished, and you have to make a decision. No, I've got to get down to the helipad. It's a rough environment, and hard work. You need a lot of stamina, a lot of strength, a lot of endurance, and you need very good technique as well. And I respect the people that do that all the time, and they're taking on massive trees, and you have to have a lot of confidence and a lot of expertise to be able to do that and read the way these big tops are going, and assert yourself. So it's just your skills don't always cross over like you think they're going to do. So like I said before, if you're one of these guys, there's nothing wrong with it. Just that you operate and you've never worked outside of your hometown, there's nothing wrong with that. But please consider that it's a big world out there, and it's quite a big industry, and it is quite diverse, and there's other people facing a lot of different challenges that you haven't come across before. So just consider that before you go on an angry rant, or you start telling me that you're better than me at this and that and the other, because for start off, it's a fallacy. It's something that you could never actually prove. But just consider whether you may have had 5 more years than me, but what have you done in those 5? What did you actually do through your 35 years, or your 30 years, or 20 years, or whatever? How much ground have you covered? How many people have you worked with? I'm going to stop that one because somebody's calling me. Yeah, sorry, constant interruptions, and I can see I'm running out of time. Talking of specialists, there's another good example is a guy on the west coast there, California maybe, that you can find his channel. His name is Rico, and he works in redwood forests. He's a climber and faller. Now only a fool could think that they're going to go from the east coast with whatever experience they have, and think they're going to go to Rico's backyard, which is quite unique, and be better than Rico at topping redwoods and falling redwoods. So just another example there about, I mentioned before about specialists. But I never intended to become a specialist at anything, but I wanted to become a good all-rounder. Okay, I think I've made that point now. Okay, this is a question I should have asked or added to the last video, but it's I'm going to do it now quickly, and it kind of ties in with some of the things I've said. I get asked why I don't have the Raptor, which is like a motorized rope ascender. Well, for starters, I don't need one, you know, between, even though we do a lot of tall trees and a lot of wide trees, in between spurring and rope walking, I manage just fine, thanks. And it would be a great luxury to have, but I'm not really looking for luxuries, because I like to keep my skills kind of homed in and well oiled. Because the more you, if you keep doing something, then you kind of stay good at it. You know, you stay in the sort of condition that you need to be in. So when you come to do it, it's not so much a struggle. So that's why I do it, you know, and that's often why I favour spurring over rope walking as well on removals, because that, you know, there's a lot of technique involved in advancing a flip line up a big wide tree. But if you're doing it often, it's definitely easier than letting your skills kind of erode and letting your technique erode, which can happen. I mean, take footlocking for example. I used to do a lot of that at one time, but then that got superseded by rope walking, and rightly so. So I wouldn't like to think I would be at footlocking now, because I just don't need, it's sort of redundant. But anyway, I'm out of time. Thanks for watching again, and don't get upset with me. Don't be sending me any angry messages. I'm making any silly assumptions about how much better you are